And guess what? We're live.
Hey there. What is going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning
Yeah.
in. It's Reaper 1300 in the building, Street Cartel, and we have ourselves boosted by Smith in the building today. Welcome, sir. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you
Thank
for
you. Thanks for the invitation.
we have there's a little lag with YouTube versus our StreamYard software, but
Okay.
If you want to watch yourself live, you can just open up YouTube and you'll be able to see yourself as well.
Okay.
At any rate, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the plug and play.
So most people aren't surprised when I tell them I'm a mechanical engineer by day. I seem to have that personality or whatever. I've been messing around with Hayabusas since 2000. So I bought a blue and silver, like right before wintertime in 2000, forever ago. And I initially started off, like the very first products that I started making were actually some manual gear-based control. So I was taking apart gear position sensors, taking all the potting out of them, rewiring them, using that sensor to actually trigger, MAC valves, or the ones you could buy from Granger at the time, for like a 2, 3, 4 stage boost controller that was relatively inexpensive. And like way back in the day, back on SuzukiHayabusa.org, a lot of the turbo guys at the time were going after those.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, when ECU Editor came out, I got into building the hardware for ECU flashing stuff, mainly for Hayabusas, a little bit for the GSXR 1000s, and then kind of did that for a long time, in addition to some small stuff like shift lights and some little accessory like just 12-volt power harnesses and stuff like that. And for the longest time, really, I kind of didn't do anything new. Not to say that I wasn't interested, but I kind of lost my mojo in it. I was riding once a year, which I'm ashamed to say. My yellow turbo boost I've had since 2000. I mean, I was putting like 50 miles a year on that bike. And when COVID hit, I, for whatever reason, just kind of got reinvigorated, redid my website. Mainly was bored because there was nothing else to do. And just kind of started going after a whole bunch of different products. And Dennis Clanton, Motorhead, is the one who kind of pushed me. He kept saying, he's like, hey, we got a bunch of bikes we got lined up that we really want to put standalones on. And, like, what do you think about making a harness? And I think after like the 15th time of saying, no, I don't think so, I don't think there's a market for it, I finally decided, like, okay, ship me a max race and then I'll start playing around with it. And so that was about 3 years ago or so. And sort of the rest is history, I guess. I've been having a lot of fun doing it.
So let me ask you this. So, because I was looking at your website earlier, and so you grab the max. So when you sell the wire harnesses, they do not include the ECU, correct?
Most of the stuff that I do now does. So when I first started off, I wasn't supplying the ECU. I really wasn't supplying any of the hardware. I was really kind of just doing the wiring. And eventually I came to figure out it would be easier if I sold everything as a package. So like typically now, like if you look at the kits that start at like $2,000 or more, that includes the ECU, the wideband, the Bosch igniter, my ECU adapter box, which, like, this is the GSXR 1000 one here, with all of the basic engine wiring, pretty much everything you need to pluck out the stock ECU, put this one in, and then start running without anything extra, like nitrous control, boost control, fuel, oil pressure, laser wheelie sensors, all that type of stuff. Then on top of that, then I can add those sensors in, and basically make it to where, from the user's standpoint, the only thing they really have to wire is hook up a positive and negative lead to the battery. That's my goal anyhow. Most of the guys that come to me, don't like to wire or are nervous about it. So I try to make everything as simple and easy as I can. Not always the easiest thing when I don't know exactly where on a bike they want to place everything. So sometimes my harnesses end up being a little bit longer to get to wherever, versus if the bike was sitting right in front of me. Yeah, I was able to do it, but been pretty successful with that. I mean, I've done a lot of Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3 Boosas. Done a couple of the GSXR 1000s now. This one's taken off pretty slow. And I'm getting into Harleys now, which is really weird.
Yeah, but you know what? And Harley guys, that's where the money is, man. Those Harley guys, they don't care. It seems
like it. Yeah, it does. It does seem like it. It's kind of funny, like testing out, rolling launch control and two-step on a bike that redlines at 5,500 RPM, with 80 horsepower.
Now, it's my understanding for the Harley stuff, someone challenged you to do it, right?
Yeah. So my good buddy Rick Livy, Rick's Custom Cycle, he's got a 2019 Street Glide that he wants to do a bunch of stuff to. So him and a bunch of other guys were, been kind of poking me about it for a while, and I'm like, I don't think I want to do it. And then I brought his bike here and started playing around with it. And I don't know if you're talking about where John Gover said, hey, I'll give you a week after you get that bike to have the thing, the thing running. And a couple hours later, I had it running on the max, which was kind of cool. So I bought a 21 Street Glide. Was it two weeks ago now, I think? So very, very different compared to a Hayabusa, that's for sure.
So I mean, go ahead. Go ahead. I guess, and this is one of the questions, but is your focal point totally on like Suzuki in general? Boostas, Gixxer 1000s? Because I don't see any Ducatis, BMWs.
So like I mentioned, I have a day job, and I've got a wife, 3 kids. We like to camp in the summer. We like to go out on the boat. My bandwidth, I feel like I'm working 24/7 all the time. I just don't have the bandwidth to try to take on lots of other bikes. I've really stuck with the Suzuki stuff just because like I've been playing with Boosas since 2000, and from an electrical perspective, like I know those bikes extremely well. To do any other random bike is just kind of difficult, just because I don't have direct access to one, and time is kind of the biggest constraint.
Yeah, because that was actually my question, is if you would be open to doing custom harnesses for other brands. But
yeah,
it's all that, it makes a lot of sense.
It's kind of challenging, and even because I have a lot of guys that like most of the guys that buy from me are more street bike oriented, because they're looking to just pull the stock ECU out but still have headlight, brake lights, turn signals, all that stuff, which is kind of where the plug and play really shines. The full on custom, like lightweight drag bike harnesses with minimal stuff on it, those are super time consuming to do. And I know there's plenty of guys that are able to do them remotely. I kind of don't, I personally don't want to go down that road, just because you never know where stuff's going to be placed on the bike, and then it's just more difficult to troubleshoot. And they're pretty labor intensive. To wire a full bike, you're talking probably a week, as opposed to a day or two to build up, test, and get a plug and play setup going. So definitely, like, what I do it's not for everybody. There's definitely a lot of the grudge guys stuff where every quarter of an ounce or half pound makes a ginormous difference. Most of the guys that have used my stuff in the past are like the 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 horsepower, ridiculously overpowered street bikes, land speed, and guys obviously drag race too, but more so like the street bike oriented crowd anyhow.
You'd be surprised though, man, because the roll race scene, everything counts as far as weight goes. And I'm over here thinking like, damn, man, his harnesses must eliminate so much shit that one of any street bike that people like to ride on the regular, but they like to roll race.
Yeah,
that would do, because even me, for my BMW, I was like, man, I really want to strip this harness, but I don't want to do that shit. I'd rather pay. And that's not something that is really available like that. Mostly anybody that I know that does it, they've done it themselves.
Yep.
And that is a labor intensive job. That's intensive work.
It's kind of scary when you start diving into pulling stuff out of a wiring harness. I have a Hayabusa powered sand rail, little 2-seater, sand buggy. And there's lots of guys that do that too. And you always see a post of like, just got done cleaning up all my wiring harnesses and stuff. Engine won't start. Anybody know why? It's always like the stuff that you don't know that you eliminate ends up being a huge thorn in your side. And you try to bypass certain things, and obviously it can be done if you really know what you're doing. But like for the average guy who doesn't spend 30 hours a week like messing with the wires for that particular bike, it can be kind of a challenge.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
for me, wiring is not even like a thought in my mind, because when I build cars and I would do like custom harnesses where you don't even see the harness, the motor looks like it doesn't even run.
Yeah.
They have companies that offer that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yep.
As
Money.
opposed, as opposed to bikes, there's not that. I forgot who I was talking to, and I was like, hey, do they make like harnesses? So you were the first example of that I saw, and I'm like, well, he must only do it for Suzuki's for a reason, which you already stated why, which makes 100% sense,
Yep. Yeah, I've looked into some other stuff. Like I was thinking about doing like I don't know the Kawasaki's too well. Is Gen 6 EX10 the latest?
I believe so.
Yes.
There's a few guys that were asking about that. So I started looking at all the wiring diagrams, started trying to figure out what it would take input and output wise in order to actually run it on a Max as opposed to the stock stuff. And quickly found out that the ECU connector, the ECU header connectors are like unobtainium. There's some, you just can't get them. So from like my perspective, I need a way to plug into the factory wiring harness. And if I can't get those connectors, then there's not much I can do. So I gave up on that one pretty quick.
That sucks, man.
Yeah.
We'll see how the Harley stuff goes. It's always a challenge though. I mean, especially on the smaller bikes, like on a Hayabusa, I mean, like, my Gen 1 with a 6-over tail section and a tiger tail on it. I mean, you could put a lunchbox or you could put a suitcase in the back of that thing, and now the new GSXR 1000s, the ZX10s, you can barely fit your wallet in the, in the tail.
Yeah.
To get a box to take place with the ECU and a Max ECU, it's like, it's pretty difficult.
I saw that you offer a plate for the Jixas.
Yeah, so Rick's Custom Cycle made that for me. So he designed, basically drops the tail section floor just enough to be able to squeeze. So on the Max, the thickest part of it here was kind of running into some of the under seat area stuff. So anyway, it drops it down and makes more room in there.
Okay. So all of this Max ECU stuff, this started from Motorhead.
Yeah, I blame him.
All right. So what if I was the guy to sit there and say, Holly, fuel pad? I've been on you about the Holly stuff recently,
Yeah.
So
I've had a number of guys ask about Holly. I've told some other guys, like, I'm not opposed to doing it. Obviously I'm a Max fanboy. That's pretty obvious. But I've done like some fuel techs. I've done a Link ECU. I've messed with some Mega Squirt stuff a long time ago. So like the adapter boxes and what I do, I could easily, I could do any standalone with that. The part that gets challenging is just, it is like every standalone is similar and what you need to do in the software setup is similar, but it's also kind of different. I spent a lot of time with Max ECU and understanding how all that works to be able to, like, when I ship an ECU, I like to have everything configured, all the sensors calibrated. I tested on my bench. Like, here's my Gen 2, basically a Gen 2 Hayabusa sitting there, so that I can test all the inputs and outputs.
Yeah.
So to learn to learn a new software isn't something I'm super excited about, when generally speaking, I'm not super fond of that ECU. But I'm willing to take a look at it.
That whole board looks wild.
Yeah, can you?
Yeah, I've got.
Greg, can you just pan over there one more time? Just
so
one more time, because
I've seen. You know what any of that is? Because all I see is boxes and wires.
I've seen it on his YouTube channel, but like,
right here, I'll show you.
When Greg starts talking, like, you got to add music. You got to be excited, because and you got to make sure you talk normal, because we don't fully understand what you say most of the time,
So right now, this ECU, the injectors, the coils and everything are basically running at like 11,000 RPM. So it's kind of cool for testing stuff to be able to, I've got throttle position input, I've got all the outputs, fuel pump, the fans and all that kind of stuff.
Wild.
So, but I've I've got one of these for Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3 Busa, GSXR 1000. I don't have them for the Harleys yet, but I'm kind of starting on that now. But it makes it easier for me to be able to test everything, because again, I want to make sure that every single wire that I have, all functions the way that it's supposed to before I'm shipping it to somebody. So at least I know when it left, like it was working as it's supposed to. It makes tech support easier and all that.
So I was looking, another thing too that I noticed, like your price points for what you do, I think are fairly reasonable for what you're doing. So because I look and talking about max ECUs with other guys, we're talking like three grand just to wire it. Forget the ECU.
Yeah. Yep.
You know what I mean? Just for someone's labor to wire up the max ECU. So I was looking, I was like, wow, man, like his prices are really reasonable for what
I try to do as a turnkey package to where, the hardest thing I would say for the user is really just installing the sensor. So putting in your oil pressure, your fuel pressure sensor, plumbing your boost control solenoids, at least, make the wiring part of it easy. But yeah, I mean, with that said, maybe I could bump the prices up tomorrow.
No. The economy.
Don't talk to Reap about bumping prices.
Might get some hate mail now.
I actually sent him a message earlier, and I told him I can't afford it. Like that, my boost is going to stay slow. Seriously.
Yeah.
But you know what? Honestly, that's my next question though. So, since you spend so much time with all of the ECU stuff, right? Why is it that the newer bikes essentially need like one of your plug and plays in a max ECU, especially the Gen 3? Why is that?
The Gen 3, and I want to be careful because I'm obviously very biased, but I'm not somebody who believes in like trying to make a sale for the point of making a sale. I think there's a lot of stuff that you can do with the stock ECU and with flashing and still be pretty successful. I've definitely sold a lot of ECUs to guys with Gen 3s that have had issues with like the hill mode coming from ABS, like for whatever reason, like when they're in the burnout box and they're laying the bike sideways back and forth, trying to warm all sides of the tire up, and the bike kind of goes into a limp mode, and they actually got to shut the bike off, restart it.
Yeah.
I've heard from some guys, and I haven't been able to verify it myself, but I've heard from some guys that the IMU, the inertial measurement unit that helps with wheelie control and the lean angle stuff, that on bikes that are really fast with really hard acceleration, that they believe that sensor is actually putting the bike into kind of a limp mode where it's limiting throttle and slowing them down. So those are a couple things right there. So like generally speaking, I would say like, naturally aspirated, like bolt-on type of stuff. I mean, I'd love to sell people one, and there's a lot of awesome stuff that you can do with it, but it's probably not necessary. But if you're talking about a 500 horse turbo bike that you want, lean cut, boost cut safeties built into it so you don't accidentally burn the motor down if something kind of goes awry, you want data logging, you want boost control, you want all those things. So instead of adding, 5 different several $100 boxes onto the bike, you can do it all in one, have one piece of software that runs everything. The Gen 3 Busa, I mean, I literally spent about 6 months in my basement staring at a board like that, watching the dash, looking at the CAN data stream, the CAN bus that's on it, trying to figure out how everything works. Because obviously, like car stuff has been CAN bus forever. Motorcycles, like specifically the Busa, I mean, they didn't go to it till 2022. CAN bus has been around since the 80s. All cars have it now. But when they did that, things just got a lot more complicated. The ECU talks to the dash talks to the ABS valve, ABS talks to the IMU. So you have all of these things that are talking CAN bus, and it's much more finicky in that if you upset something on the bike, just pulling the battery cable off and putting it back on doesn't clear everything like it does on the older bikes. You actually have to go in and clear codes and figure out what the heck's wrong with it. I've sold some ECUs to guys that they're basically just like, I can't get the bike to run on the stock ECU anymore. Like I tried taking the ABS valve off, I did something else, I put it back in. No matter what I do, the bike has like 20% throttle maximum, and they just got tired of fighting with it. So I think if you're using the bike the way it was intended by Suzuki with stock or maybe some mild, bolt-ons, you're probably okay. But when you start going to the other extreme and you really want to try to get every last thing out of it, and you're making double the horsepower or whatever over stock, it becomes finicky and kind of problematic.
Is that your girlfriend? Is that your wife, Katie Smith, that just joined the chat?
Yes. I was like, I saw that. I was like, that's gotta be hi, Mrs. Smith.
See, that's what I call support right there.
Yeah.
That's what I call support.
She's been texting my family, so I think I may have family from like Colorado and Florida and some other friends that might join in that aren't necessarily motorcycle people, but help support the cause.
Right.
That's awesome. So
I always try to tell.
Is that so? Your Busa that's the only bike you have?
No. I've got I have a 2000 turbo Busa. It's bright yellow is my thing. It's bright yellow. I wish the Gen 3 was yellow. I've had it ever since 2000. I had an 08 turbo Busa as well that my uncle in Florida now owns. It made like 356 on the stock ECU back when ECU editor stuff. We first started doing like boost fuel tuning with those. My wife had an 05 Busa for a while that was mild motor built and a little bit of nitrous. And then I just bought that Harley, like I mentioned earlier. And then I've got what the heck else do I have? I've got an 01 Honda Shadow that was kind of given to me by my father-in-law. I don't really ride it too much, but so I got a few. And then, like I said, I have the two-seater Sandrail that's got a Gen 1 turbo Busa motor in it, which is just a blast to drive.
So you just love boost, literally.
Boost.
Oh
yeah, man. I don't know, man. Hey, man, I might have to
everything he has is boosted.
Here.
Gotta have boost, absolutely. Yeah, my son is he's a freshman in college. He's got a New Edge Mustang, an 03 or an 04 that we bought together, and so we're splitting expenses and mods and stuff. And he just got a turbo kit for it. We haven't put it on yet, but so trying to teach him young.
Jeez, talk about boosters in a family. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I might have to change my mind, Reap, and buy a Busa.
No. Seriously, do it. Yeah. Just don't buy a Gen 3. They suck.
They're really that bad, huh?
Gen 3 suck.
I love my Gen 3. But I'll agree, for the money they cost to buy up front and the performance that you get out of it, they really, really went the sport touring, man. They went really hard in the hard direction of the touring setup. I remember when they first came out and I saw all this, basically all the electronic nannies on them, and basically, it makes a couple horsepower less than the Gen 2. And I'm like, well, that's a bummer. I didn't even like the way it looked at the time. And then, so Andre, he let me borrow his Gen 3 for the winter to develop the Max ECU stuff on it after I basically stared in my basement at all the wiring stuff for a while. He brought me a bike to actually put it on and get it going. And I just fell in love with it. And then I bought one.
Well, so initially for my Gen 3, right, I had put in an order. You remember back in the day, like you had to order the bike before it came out because they had the pre-orders.
Yep.
And then because I was following all of the hype, 1441 and/or Boost from factory.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I once it was released, I was just kind of like, come on, So I got my money back, of course. Yeah. And then the black one, the one that you have, the one that I have, it just kind of grew on me. I guess my biggest thing right now is, I see Max is very popular, but my builder and/or tuner, he's really, really big into Holley EFI. So
yeah,
so I mean, I don't know. Your favorite is Max, but would you work with Holley a little bit? I mean, you already answered that question, but what are the differences that you've seen?
If you were to go that route, what would you want to run for a dash?
Well, of course, I would. I have several. I have the 6.8, and then I have the actual 7. I love the 7.
Oh, so you would go with the after? That's what I was wondering. If you wanted the stock dash or an aftermarket dash.
No. I already have. Okay. Oh, I'm disclosing too much. I will talk to you offline. There's a lot going on in there. I'm trying to beat 2030. I got some projects. I got some projects. So yeah.
The reason I was asking that is, so I mentioned like the Gen 3 has a lot of stuff that's CAN bus.
Mm-hmm.
And are you guys familiar? Like I can geek out for a minute, or I don't know if you're
ahead,
familiar with. So
okay, so I know BMW has CAN bus, right? BMW has that.
Oh yeah,
right?
everything. All the new bikes do for sure.
Okay.
So if you think about like an old Gen 1 Busa, you've got a tach signal and a speedometer signal that go to the dash.
Okay.
Each one of those is a wire, and it's got a square wave signal that it pulses in order to move the needles on the gauges. On a Gen 3, everything on the dash is done over CAN bus. So there's two wires that basically transmits all of the data through different messages and signals, and that's what actually controls the dash. The cool thing about Max ECU is their CAN bus stuff is wide open and it's really flexible. There's, other than maybe Motec, after you spend a whole bunch of money, there's really nothing else that has the ability to be able to interact with things in CAN bus like Max ECU does. Like Holly, everything is kind of locked down. You can plug in another, a Holly dash and it'll work over CAN. But if you want to start adding other things to it, it's not, I don't think it's really possible or very user friendly. Same kind of thing with Fuel Tech. Like you can buy a Fuel Tech branded device to plug in over CAN, like their nano wideband or like their expansion module. But if you want to plug something else in, like the IMU on the bike or the ABS valve, and you actually want to get data from it, you can't really do that with those other ECUs. So you certainly can. I mean, there's no reason that we can't put a Holly on a Gen 3. But like the left-hand control, you've got the center select button, you've got up, you got down, you have the cruise control button over on the right-hand side. If you wanted to use those for anything, like rolling launch control, air shift, or even if you wanted to do cruise control, those would have to be a normal wired input to the Holly. So if you figure right there, there's 4 inputs. Well, that's way too many fingers. There's 4 inputs that you're now going to consume alongside your other things like wheel speed sensors and throttle position sensors and your electric throttle body drive motor wiring and all that stuff. So like pretty quickly you can run out of available inputs and outputs on an ECU, depending again what you want to do with it. I know a lot of guys go standalone and they're looking for just very minimal. As long as the bike starts up, it's got a 2-step and the throttle works. That's all that they really need. I kind of like enjoy the challenge of like making the bike as almost as factory as it used to be, or as much as I possibly can, with some added stuff on top of that.
Right.
So it's really just kind of what your end goal is and what you want to do with it. I've had some guys like you see go out and buy a brand new Gen 3 and then go to something else with an aftermarket dash and whatever, and like it's kind of weird, but the dash is sort of the heart of that bike. Like everything sort of the cruise control stuff, like it goes into the dash and then comes back out to the ECU. Like once you pull the dash out, like that stuff doesn't really function anymore without a whole lot of work, sort of manually wiring per se.
Do you have a preference, Reap, when it comes to standalones?
Maybe Max.
So my preference is I was taught a long time ago. So like whatever your tuner and or builder picks, like that's what you should go with because that's what they're comfortable with.
It's hard to disagree with that.
Initially I wanted Motec, but I don't have Motec money. Motec is expensive. It's ridiculous.
Very, very expensive.
Nice stuff though. And then
it's very nice, yeah.
Of course, Max ECU, but then again, like I said, my guy doesn't utilize Max, so
understood.
Well, Haltech, because
Jared said something about Haltech. Yeah,
I've actually never played with one. I had a guy that was just over I'm in Michigan. He was just over the border in Canada that he was going to have me wire a Haltech for him, and it fell through, and I never did it. So it seems, I mean, from what I've read about them and stuff, they do seem nice. They seem pretty flexible, but I've never physically held one or looked at the software in depth very much. So
what you're telling me is you would physically need, like, let's say a Ducati V4R. You would probably need that bike in your possession.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like I said, it takes a while. Like if the goal is just to make the engine run with a standalone, like that's relatively easy. Not to say that there aren't challenges involved with that. Mm-hmm. But it's more so like do you want the bike to do all the things that it used to do stock, with the stock dash still working, with whatever hand control buttons and modes that it has? That's the very difficult part. I mean, that's what I literally spent like 6 months doing on my Gen 3. No different than like now the Harleys. So as much as I've never really been a Harley fan, like from an electrical architectural standpoint, the bike is really interesting because it's pretty complex. You've got the radio, you have the dash, you've got the ABS, if it has ABS, if it has the traction control system, it has an IMU also. You have the ECU, and then it actually has a body control module like a car does. So there's a whole separate module that's responsible for powering everything up. So on the Harleys, like in order to get the fuel pump to prime, I'm not doing it with the max ECU's wiring. Same thing like with the starter. You have to do all of that basically with software over CAN. So it's like understanding how does that work in the stock configuration, and then figuring out what stuff do you have to fake enough so that the bike doesn't realize that there isn't a stock ECU in there anymore, and that it'll still do stuff.
Right.
I could understand why you stick to what you know, because I can only imagine you would probably have I bet you if you wanted to, you could probably have every brand sitting in your garage ready to wire up, and it'd be
imagine the work though, like
imagine that.
Work.
Imagine that.
Oh my God, that's
6
ridiculous.
months just looking at a board, making sure it's solid.
Yeah. So way back when, because I was a fan of Greg, like, because I've ordered parts off his website, for my boosters and stuff. And I can remember I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna teach myself tuning. I'm gonna use ECU editor because I have about 2 boosters with ECU editor on it. So
okay.
I swear, I'm sorry, Greg, but I watch your YouTube channel, and I swear the square root of the wire that plugs into the IMU, I was like, what the hell are you talking about?
Me and Rico,
I was so lost.
We were talking about that, Greg.
I was so lost.
Me and Repo were like, what are we gonna ask him? Like, what are the molecules and the megatrons that go into this part of the ECU that makes that pulsate to run? Like, you know what I'm saying? God knows what. Like, wiring is so complex, man, that it's scary.
I heard the comments on my stuff is pretty dry, which I 1000% agree with. The part that cracks me up is like, at least to me, like I'll take a video of something very interesting or something that I'm like super proud of that I just figured out. And to most people, it's like, okay, whatever, big deal. Right. And then like I'll post a video of pulling out my phone and starting a bike, and like people
1,000 likes right away,
crazy over it. And it's just it's insane.
Well, yeah, but you know what, Greg? At the end
why
of
would
the
you
day,
question
man,
that,
right?
Though? Why would you why would you question, like, who starts their bike off their phone though? Who does that?
That's sick.
Like, come on,
I've never seen a bike on the 2-step remote control, so I thought that would be fun to do.
That's sick. I was like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
The other thing that I want to do, I started to mess with it to figure it out, but it's going to take a long time. John Gover and I were talking about it, but I'd love to do something similar, but basically have the bike play a song. Like, I think it'd be cool as hell to like have a Turbo Boosa play like the Star Spangled Banner, basically have the bike sitting on the 2-step at all different rev limiter RPMs to actually play the song. At the end of it, flames and shit popping and all that. Like, that would be pretty cool, but that would be a lot of time invested.
Yeah, you're on a different level.
Yeah, like, why? Yeah, who thinks of that though? You just lay down.
I don't spend much time. I have drag raced a little bit, like a really long time ago in the early 2000s. I would say most of what I do these days is like old guy tinkering stuff. Like, I like tinkering with the ECU stuff. I like to street ride, but like I said, out by me, I hardly ever see cars, let alone other bikes. I live out in the middle of nowhere, 2-lane country roads, deer running out in front of you and all that kind of stuff. So what I enjoy is a fair bit different than what a lot of, sport bike guys like to do, or, I'm probably an hour from any scene where there's, 50 bikes, guys are out on the highway doing pulls and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Not really my thing necessarily.
Right.
Yeah. And hey, you know what? Even though like you say like the content on your YouTube may be dry, but there's still those people that I'm sure really, really appreciate it. And those are the people that really count at the end of the day, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do get people that comment like, "Oh, thanks, I watch all your stuff," and I'm like, "Man, you got to get a hobby."
It's not bad. Like years ago when I watched it, I didn't fully understand, so I'm joking about it now. But
right.
then when I actually saw ECU Editor, I believe we were looking at a boost, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Harville Performance out of New Jersey. He was kind of showing it to me and stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, now I see what he meant on the video. I actually made that comment, because I understood it. But
now,
I mean,
do you get a lot of people that message you or inquire about that have all motor boosters?
Yeah, I've done. I mean, I would say most of what I've done for the standalones has been turbo, and then probably a split between nitrous guys and all motor stuff. But that's been, I don't know, it's probably like 20 or 25% of the population. It seems like most of it's been turbo bikes.
Turbo.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be a necessity for most turbo bikes, I would say.
For as easy as a turbo bike is to melt, if you don't really know what you're doing and the tune's not spot on, like a standalone, if implemented properly, can really help prevent that. Obviously, crap can happen no matter what, but there's a lot of safeties that you can put in, to keep the bike from trying to go to 15-to-1 air fuel at 30 pounds of boost for 4 or 5 seconds before you realize it, and then the rods are hanging out the front of it.
I was actually going to ask you that. Is it easier to have safety parameters for, I guess, a standalone versus a stock ECU? Because I don't even know if you can do that.
Sure. Yeah, so like in the in pretty much every standalone, you're going to have closed loop fuel control. So you've got a lambda target or an air fuel target table that you put in, and that can be really simple. You say like, I want one air fuel value, or it can be on a table with a bunch of different axes for RPM, boost pressure. If you're running like flex fuel, what your ethanol content of the fuel is, because you could get away with more on E85 than you could on pump gas. So you've got a lambda target that the ECU is going to do as much as you allow it to do to try to control it, even if your fuel table is off. So like I've had guys who basically throw the ECU in and fire the bike up for 5 minutes. And he's like, all right, I'm going to the track. And I'm like, nah, you need to go tune this thing on the dyno. And he's like, nah, I'm just going to go to the track. I'm like, okay. So he goes to the track, and I said, well, why don't you just go out and make get up into third gear or something, and then just, make a wide open hit for a couple thousand RPM. Let's just take a look at stuff and see how it looks. And then he comes back and he's like, oh, I went 905 at, 150, whatever. And I'm like, dude. And the air fuel curve, was as flat as could be, exactly where the target was, but it was correcting like 25%. Like his fuel was way lean for the type of fuel that he was running and the base map that was in there compared to his bike. So really the fueling was way the hell off. Like had he not had closed loop fuel control and some of the safeties in, like probably would have melted the motor. Now it wasn't a super exotic or high horsepower, so maybe it would have been okay. But had that been like a turbo bike or something, yeah, it would have been bad.
Oh, okay.
On the turbo bikes, like you can put in a boost cut. So you can say like, if the most you're ever going to run is 14 pounds of boost, 15 or 16 PSI, if it hits that level of boost, basically it will kill all fuel and ignition. Basically, you think the bike completely dies. It'll bring the bike back to idle. So you can kind of, coast, pull over, and then it has a reset where you actually have to come off the throttle and then get back into the throttle before the bike sort of like wakes up and goes back into normal mode again. But like I had a customer, they had a wastegate issue, or line blew off or something, and they were on pump gas, and basically the bike went to like 40 pounds of boost really quickly, and thankfully like boost cut and everything saved it, like it didn't hurt anything, but it can be detrimental.
Yeah.
So you've got that, right? You've got lean air fuel cuts that you can put in as well. So if the bike is so lean, so let's just say above 13-to-1 for more than a quarter, a half a second, whatever, above X boost pressure, it'll do the same thing. Like it'll go into a safety mode and sort of prevent you from killing the thing. You can do the same thing with oil pressure cuts. So if you're at 11,000 RPM and you've got 5 PSI oil pressure, you can shut down the engine as well. So it doesn't save you, and it's not a band-aid for like not building the engine correctly or doing the right stuff. But there's definitely a lot of issues that I've seen before that if everything was set up, turned on, and the safeties were set up, it probably would have prevented engine failure. So it's like standalones are expensive. If you're looking at a few grand, rebuilding engines is too. So
right.
Again, not to try to shove standalones down everyone's throat, because they're not for everybody. It's a different ball game when you can control every single thing that the ECU does. Like, it's awesome, and then it's also scary as hell.
Right.
Because it'll do whatever you tell it. It'll do whatever you tell it to do, even if what you tell it to do is wrong and doesn't make sense. Like, it's just following the software prompts. It'll just do it.
I think so that Gen 6, I want to say he has a max on his. He has a ZX10, right? Gen 6 ZX10, I believe. And so, have you built anything for the ZX10s, Greg, or no?
No, I haven't. I had an 04 ZX10 way back when, before I really got into any of this stuff. But
those are my favorite bikes. My favorite.
Yeah, I like
Little Maker.
Yeah. Man, first gear was so long in that bike. I think first gear was like 102 miles an hour or something. It was ridiculous.
That bike was so nice, man.
I sold that bike in order to pay for my 2000 Busa's turbo kit and motor parts. So I was trying to play around with toy money a little bit, so I wasn't spending anything new. So I got rid of that bike and then exchanged it for intercooled turbo and big injectors, big pump, and rods, pistons, and all that. Or actually, not pistons, but all the motor work that I needed on the earlier bike.
You don't build your own motors, do you? Or no?
I did on my 2000, but over the years, I've done less and less mechanical stuff, and I've gotten crappier at it. And I mentioned Rick's Custom Cycle a few times. He's a good buddy of mine. His shop is less than an hour from me, and he builds motors all day long. He builds a lot of really high horsepower turbo bikes and stuff. So on that stuff, like, I'll pull the motor out, take it to him, drop it off, and then pick it back up when he's got the motor back together. So like my Gen 3, I pulled the motor out, put it back in. I've put all the turbo stuff on, but all the stuff inside spinning at 11,000 RPM at 20 pounds of boost or whatever I'm planning, I feel a little more comfortable with somebody who does that on a daily basis than me.
Yeah.
I think I could do it. I mean, obviously I've done it before, but I don't know. I just kind of like the peace of mind of somebody who really knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
So okay. So Rick, that's the other RCC, not the one from Canada.
Not from Canada.
Not from Canada. Okay, the other RCC. Okay.
Yeah.
I swore that you had got it from Scott Davis or something, or RCC, like your turbo kit.
The turbo kit for the Gen 3 is from Scott Davis. Yep.
Okay.
And then my Gen 1 and the Gen 2 I had, actually the Gen 2 I had a RCC kit on it. My Gen 1 has some stuff that Motorhead pieced together and some RCC stuff. So got a little bit of everything. My Sandrail has a Han kit, which you guys probably aren't old enough to even
Actually,
know.
I am. I know who Han is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the stuff, they're pretty low quality, old school, whatever. But for my Sandrail on a stock motor with just 7 pounds of boost, like it does fine.
Yeah, Reef's fucking old. Don't let him fool you.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not that old. I just I've been around bikes for a while now,
Yeah.
That's what I think.
I mean, way back, on like SuzukiHayabusa.org and Hayabusa.org. I mean, I was a kid back then. I think I was 20 when I bought my Busa. And most of the guys, it seemed like they were probably more my age now. I'm 40, 44 now. But yeah,
Reef's around your age. Look at you guys, you fucking old guys. See, I'm in my 30s. I'm riding the 30 train.
I'm not 44 yet. But you know what? You look great for 44. I'm sure I look great for 41 too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
We're awesome. We're in. These 30s are not.
I've got the filter on.
Let me
if it looks like I've got makeup and whatever. No.
You had Miss Smith prepare you before you got on? But no, I mean, seriously though, like okay, so what is the average price? Because this is one of the questions, and I'm gonna bring it up at the very end.
Okay.
But what's the average price for a Gen 3? I know you're biased, but for a standalone in general. from wiring to.
That's a little bit challenging because, like, from a plug and play standpoint, to the best of my knowledge, there's Motec, and their stuff came out first. I believe it used to be like I thought it was like $7,000 when it first came out. I think now it's like $49.95 or it's $5,000 with no sensors or anything. And then there's what I have for the Max ECU, which the package starts at $3,250. So that's basically like the stock ECU replacement with the Max. That doesn't include boost control or like adding air shifter harness and all that stuff.
Okay.
So it kind of depends on like what all people want to add. Generally speaking, at least with my setup, on the Gen 3s, guys have been a little north of $4,000, but it's usually been turbo bikes with, dual boost control valves, fuel, oil pressure, some of them with a laser ride height sensor, which those are, $500-$600. Those are pretty expensive.
With all the bells and whistles, that's when it starts climbing.
Yeah, pretty much. Fuel Tech, I think there's only one Gen 3 on a Fuel Tech that I'm aware of. There's a guy on Hayabusa.org that did his own, and he has an FT600 on it. I forget how much that ECU costs, but he did all the wiring himself. So for the Gen 3, I'm not really aware of very many people that have actually done like full-on custom harnesses and stuff on those. I've seen a couple overseas, like there's a guy in Greece that has one. But normally, like if you're going from scratch harness, and again, I don't do those. I've only done a couple of those. Usually what I hear people paying is $2,500, $3,500, $4,000 for the harness, plus the ECU, plus the sensors. So going that route, I mean, it can get pretty damn expensive pretty quick. $7,000-8,000 probably pretty easily. Even more if you're going like a Motec. I mean, you guys spending $10,000 on Motec setups and stuff.
Yeah.
The Gen 3 is more involved and more expensive. Like a Gen 2 and a Gen 1 setup for me is a fair bit cheaper. Like where the Gen 3 starts at $3,250, like the Gen 2 starts at $2,500 for it's a similar package. It doesn't have as much stuff going on because the bike doesn't have CAN bus and all that. But that's the full package with ECU, igniter, wideband, all the wiring, and then kind of goes up from there.
So I was looking into you brought up the rod height sensor. So is Loop better than Banner now? In your opinion, anyways, because
from what I hear, and again, this is kind of weird for me because like I'm not at the track racing with them. What I've heard people complain about with the Banner sensors is that they have issues with sunlight. So like when it's pointed down at the at the black asphalt or the concrete or whatever, and you get sunlight, that it can kind of mess with the sensor, and the distance measurement will become erratic. I've heard that the Loop sensor is kind of like the one to go to now. So there's Loop Research, there's Mad Racing, there's Banner, and I'm trying to think if there's another one that's out there as well. From what I've heard, Loop seems to be like the one to go with. It's also the most expensive one too, but
it really is. You see, I wasted my money on Banner already. You see what I mean? Technology. My projects are taking so long that everything's evolving.
Yeah, I can relate.
It's just, it sucks.
So if you have a customer, right, that's running a turbo kit on a stock booster, do you feel like a Max is overkill, or do you feel like it's probably the way to go right off the rip?
Again, my opinion is really biased. In my mind, I kind of like the peace of mind of the safeties of being able to data log, being able to have closed loop fuel control, which you can't do any of that with the stock ECU stuff. But with that said, I mean, I had a Han kit making over 300 horsepower on my 2000 Busa, over 20 years ago for a long time on a Power Commander, and never blew it up. So you can certainly get by. I think on the latest bikes, like the Gen 3, there's been a couple of guys that have done stock ECU. But to my knowledge, I don't think that they've got a lot of like seat time or riding time with them yet. So I'm not sure what issues they might run into, if any. Again, in my mind, like especially taking your bike to somebody if they haven't tuned turbo bikes, which you don't ever want to do that. They're easier to melt than a lot of other stuff. You know, like on a stock bike, you can have the tune quite a ways off and go hammer on it without completely melting the thing down. Where on a turbo bike, you grab 2 or 3 gears at high boost and you go lean on it, like it's gonna melt itself pretty quick.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about that because a couple of my buddies were asking. Because truth be told, on the street, I don't know of too many turbo boosters that actually even running correctly.
Yeah.
I feel like that's far few in between that I hear of a turbo booster, a streetable turbo booster that's running the way that it should.
Right.
And I always wondered if that was if they're running on a stock ECU, is that the issue? If they ran a max, would they run into less problems? You know what I mean?
A lot of it's just like with a turbo bike, there's so many more things that you have to worry about and consider than a nitrous bike or like an all motor bike. You got a blow off valve, you've got your wastegate. So you need to, if you're trying to do boost control, you need some way to increase fueling upon boost pressure. So whether it's a rising rate FMU, rising rate fuel regulator, which is kind of the inexpensive but not so great way of doing it, or big injectors and a separate fuel controller. There's a lot of puzzle pieces that, unfortunately, I think a lot of people end up trying to tackle on their own. And you see so many turbo bikes that are for sale that just need a tune. Like it's all put together, it's all brand new, everything's good to go.
Always,
except it needs a tune, which means basically like this bike's going to blow up if you go out and ride it.
Yes, never just a tune. Anybody that would actually even think that that's the truth, it would be beyond me, because I would buy it knowing that I'm probably better off tearing it down and starting from scratch.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of where I think like taking it to somebody who builds those bikes on the regular is probably really the way to go. You take it to like somebody like Motorhead. I mean, he's been building turbo bikes for probably 30 years now. So, he started off with Power Commander stuff. Now almost everything he's doing is standalones. But just having somebody who's familiar with it. I mean, you hear a lot of turbo bike guys that, they take it to a DynoJet approved tuning center for guys that normally tune Harleys or something on it. And they put the thing under boost and they're targeting, 14-to-1 air fuel, and they melt the thing like 2 passes in, or, the bike just doesn't run right. And there's just a lot more stuff to do. But like I mentioned, my uncle has my old Gen 2. He's got a Gen 1 Anderson turbo bike that bike's got over 100,000 miles on it now, turbocharged. And he beats the living bejesus out of that bike. I mean, he gives it a run for its money all the time when he rides it, and he's put 100,000 miles on it. Not to say that they've been like 1,000% issue free, but he hasn't been through 20 motors on it or anything like that.
Wow. And what kind of kit was on that bike?
That's crazy.
That's a lot of miles for a turbo bike.
That's Anderson turbos, which I think there's only like 3 of those kits in the U.S. My uncle has one. My buddy Phil, who lives about an hour from me, he has one. His has become a living room decoration. He has his bike set up in the living room for about the last 10 years or so. I forget who had the third one. Are you guys familiar with MC Express turbos?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Anderson's was similar to that, but everything he does, like his craftsmanship, his fabrication stuff, is 1,000,000% top notch. Just really, really, really nice. Like the kits came shipped over in this really nice, like custom wood, crate with everything sort of bolted down and organized, and just a really good guy. He's got some pretty interesting posts with his turbo funny bike and stuff that he has now, all the stuff that he's done on it.
Is he still around? Does he still make kits? Or
I don't think he's making kits. I'm not 100% sure on that. He's definitely still racing, and I've seen him build some stuff on his own bikes. Like I said, back in the day, I don't know how many sold overseas, but there were just a few that were done in the U.S. I don't know him real well personally. I've talked to him a couple of times, but
I don't know. I feel like building turbo bikes are just so expensive, because even mine, and I talk to Cartel all the time about like my project, right? And I think I'm gonna go broke trying to build it.
I hear you.
I'm serious. between the kit, the bike, the standalone, as you just alluded to, like it's So to answer Cartel's question, like earlier, I think that's the reason why like a lot of the street bikes don't have all of it, because it just costs too much.
Yeah.
Well, do you guys think that there's a balance though, right? So, for example, on a car, you could throw, I don't know, let's say it's like a Honda, you could throw a thick head gasket on it, and you may not run all the boost in the world, but you could run a substantial amount and get away with it for a decent amount of time. So, like, is that an option to run like a thicker head gasket on a booster, maybe injectors, fuel management? And or like a max ECU and let it ride with like 5 pounds? Is that like a thing?
Oh yeah. The problem is it's just like, that'll be more than enough horsepower. That's all I ever need. And then like 2 hours in, you're like, I want some more boost.
2 hours in.
So that's where the problem lies. Okay.
Because I did that with my Gen 2. Like it was 4 pounds of boost. It was like, I don't know, 220 or 230 horsepower. You're like, that's all I need. Stock swing arm. It's not extended or anything like that. And you ride it a couple of times, and like my other bike made like 460 at the tire, and you're like, I kind of want some more boost.
Right.
So you can certainly do it. And I think probably most of like the guys that buy RCC kits and stuff, I don't know for a fact, but my assumption is that he probably sells a ton more like stage 1 kits than he does ultra plenums, 600 horsepower, E85 or methanol or whatever, just obviously because of the price point for one. And then you kind of get into 2 totally different avenues where your basic stage 1, is probably a guy that just has a street bike that he wants to be a little bit faster. And he's going to go out and ride it and have fun with it. The other end of it, you end up spending so much damn money on them, and you're always tinkering with something, or maybe you're afraid of blowing it up. And then, I don't know, in my past experience, it always felt like the more stuff I did to my bike and the more money I spent on it, the less I use it, which is so like upside down, ass backwards. But I mean, it's kind of the truth,
I don't like that feeling. I don't ever want to get to that point where I own a bike that I can't ride for significant reasons, or I feel like it would take away from the sport, and like just want to do anything else when you get to that point.
Right.
Like, it's kind of like, all right, well, I got to change the oil after every hit that I make on this bike, or check my bearings, or you know what I mean? Like
But like what you were talking about, I mean, my sand rail, so it weighs a little over 1,000 pounds with no one in it. So normally it's, me and my son. He's a lightweight, but I'm not. It's a stock, I think it's a 2003 Gen 1 motor. To the best of my knowledge, I bought this thing right at the beginning of COVID from a guy in Vegas. And like this machine was rode really hard and put away really wet. Like I think it's a stock motor that's just been flogged on its entire life. And I basically bolted a Hon kit on it, about 7 pounds of boost. Now I am running a max ECU, so I can keep an eye on everything and hopefully keep it from melting itself. But if you look at like the abuse that I put that thing through, with big scoops on paddle tires, with easily way more than double the weight of a stock bike. And we're climbing hills and we're jumping and doing all kinds of goofy stuff with it. Knock on wood, I'm going to blow it up the first time I take it out now. But like, I broke everything there is to break on that sand rail, but not engine stuff. Everything else, the rear A arms, sprockets, the axles, I broke so much crap on that thing. But like the engine has actually been pretty damn good. And we idle, or we go really slow in the entrance and the exit at the dunes. And then anytime we're riding, I mean, it's, running on the rolling anti-lag, which is the most fun thing in the world to ever do. If you guys have never done it, you really got to try it. But basically, hold the button, go wide open. You got the turbo spooling up to full boost, and then let go of the button and take off, and run it through a few gears and then turn around and do it again. So anyway, I beat the living crap out of that thing, and on a super old wore out motor, and it's doing okay until I take it out now.
All right, I need your opinion, Greg. So Gen 2 or Gen 3 booster, if you was trying to be as fast as possible on boost, what would you pick?
Does money matter?
Well, I mean, money always matters, but okay.
I mean, dollar for dollar, the Gen 2 is pretty hard to beat because, I mean, even it seems like you're seeing a lot of Gen 3s now for like 14, 15 grand. You know, at first everybody was wanting, 18, 19, 20,000 bucks for a used bike. And obviously you can get a Gen 2 cheaper than that. So there's a fairly decent difference there. There still is the issue, depending upon what you're going to use the bike for. The clutch in the Gen 3 is totally different. So, I mean, you can put an MTC Gen 2 in it now, and I think Hayes has a convertible clutch for the Gen 3. But some of the more basic, like 2-stage lockups or like the NLR, you can't bolt any of those onto a Gen 3 unless you change out all the trans stuff. So when Rick built my motor, we basically backdated it and put an older input shaft, and there's a few things that we had to change in order to, to make it work with the old clutch. So right there, you can sink some money just in those things right there. So, I mean, it's really, I guess, whatever you like the body work on better. And I didn't like the Gen 3 dash at all when they first came out, but I actually love the dash now. So I guess what you like aesthetic wise. Other than that, the bikes are pretty damn similar, with the exception of the Gen 3 just being more complicated and have the electronic throttle. Yeah. So you can't push button start and rev up your Gen 2, but you can your Gen 3. So for whatever that's worth.
Well, I'm told that your plug and play harnesses, if you do have a Gen 3, this is the way to go. You have to get a max. You have to get a max to unlock everything the Gen 3 has to offer. That's what I'm told. I don't know, because as I told you earlier, I'm too cheap.
I'm sorry, as soon as you started saying Gen 3.
Oh, I think your signal's going in and out. I think your signal's going in and out. But I said, basically, does a Gen 3 need a standalone ECU to unlock everything it has to offer? Oh, he's freezing a little bit, I think.
Shoot.
There you go. I think you're back. You're moving around a little bit.
All right.
Oh, okay. Okay, I got another question, Greg.
All right.
How in the world do you build all of this crazy stuff and your internet has something going on? I don't understand what's happening right now. How?
You should be running.
I live in the middle of nowhere.
Like, what's going on with you right now?
I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And actually, our internet's way better than when we first moved out here.
Yeah.
It's funny saying that. So, like, about a year ago, I posted a video of one of my little boards doing something. And in the background, I had an old laptop with like Windows XP on it. And then people started razzing me about that. Like, how are you doing this stuff and you got a laptop with Windows XP on it?
Yeah.
Well, I just use that for Quicken because I don't want to buy a subscription to Quicken. It just, I bought a CD 20 years ago. But anyway, yeah, I can appreciate the comment.
So my initial question was, basically, do I need a max ECU and or a standalone to unlock my Gen 3? Like, I have to have that in order to, because I don't know, Brentoon, Woolwich, there's other options, you know what I mean, to unlock it, but my understanding is several have gone max ECU versus the stock option.
Yeah, you don't need a max ECU for that, especially if you're just talking like, the basic bolt-on stuff. The only exception to that, I would say, is when, again, I haven't experienced it myself, but like when some of the guys have said, like, no matter what I do on my bike, I can't get the throttle to open all the way. Like the bike is always going into, some type of limp mode or something. But assuming there's no issues with the bike, especially if you're just talking about like a bone stock bike, in my opinion, there is no real free horsepower. I mean, you can play with the timing a little bit. You can get a little bit, but unfortunately, there's nothing like some of the leader bikes where like, oh yeah, I'm going to pick up 30 horsepower at Redline by just, flashing the software or by adding a max ECU. Because I get that question somewhat frequently. It's like, well, how much horsepower am I going to pick up when I go with the max? And I'm like, none. If your bike is tuned optimally now, you're not going to pick up any horsepower. It's really just there to provide you with control over everything that you want to do. Or if you're being limited by the stock stuff that's there now, those limits kind of go away and are a figment of your imagination. The one thing that on the Gen 3s, and again, I don't think there's many guys on stock ECU that are riding them with turbos yet, but Have you experienced on your Gen 3, I don't even know what to call it. Everybody calls it like a quick shifter delay or something like that. But it's happened on my bike a little bit of time. You know, you wide open throttle first gear, you grab second gear, and it just feels like the throttle is at like 30% throttle for like a quarter of a second or a half a second, and then it comes back on.
Yeah.
That's the part that scares me about, like, if you've got a stage 1 turbo kit making 250, 260 horsepower, and you start doing that type of stuff. It made me kind of nervous when the bike was bone stock. And if you add another 70, 80 horsepower or whatever, things might get kind of entertaining.
Right.
Hopefully the wheelie controller and whatever will.
He'll be back.
Yeah, he'll
be back.
I'm trying to understand
what's going on,
how.
Evan? How you doing?
How Greg has all of this
want
going on, and yet
I'm sorry, this is terrible.
I don't understand what's happening right now. You know,
I don't either.
Okay, you know what? You were totally fine until you turned that board on. I think you need to turn the board off. Like turn all those lights off, and maybe you'll have signal.
Yeah, we're gonna turn. Yeah, we're gonna blame it on the board.
Electrical interference. Yeah.
Electrical interference.
Hey, thanks, Evan. Hey, so I don't need a standalone then. And yes, I do feel that massive delay when I'm under hard acceleration. I do. I really do.
Yeah.
But for me, I don't think that I would. The Gen 3 doesn't warrant what I want, to spend money on, just because it's just too much,
Yeah.
But I guess down the road, whenever in 2030, when all my projects are complete, then perhaps I'll do something to the Gen 3.
Right. Yeah, my wife is probably watching, so I can't talk about the cost of what I've spent on that, but we could talk about that offline.
Yeah. Hey, it's funny. So I asked my wife earlier. I said she was looking at one of my NA project, and me and Kartel talk about this all the time, And I said I was like, how much you think that I spent on this bike already? And she's like, and I'm like, oh man, it's so crazy. It's ridiculous how much bikes cost, but it's inflation, right?
Yeah.
It's the economy. Yep. I'm gonna run for president. You gonna vote for me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Make motorcycle parts affordable. You got my vote. Listen, man, I will say this: compared to the car world that I came from, there's definitely a threshold, right, that you get to at a specific point where either if you want to compete, right, and then right, for like what I do, roll racing, you're competing for free unless you want to, race for huge dollar signs, but then you're $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 into a motor.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So I feel like there's definitely a threshold on where bikes are definitely cheaper, and then you get to the point where it's kind of like you guys mentioned. Well, I want to run more than 5 pounds of boost, so let's start swiping. You know what I mean?
Man,
so
I'll tell you. So at least personally, for it's never mind. I don't even feel like doing it because my wife might be watching. Yeah, my wife might be watching, and then I'm thinking about the amount of cost into my turbo build. It's just it's silly. It's stupid.
I love the joke that is my biggest fear in life is that when I die, my wife sells all my stuff for what I told her I paid for it.
Oh man. Hey, my wife. So I'm kind of like yourself, right? So I'm lucky because my wife rides, but I'll tell you, I don't know. Anyways, this is what I want to do, Greg. So remember I said I had some questions. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna open it up to the chat, whomever's watching. To ask some questions, and then I'm gonna bring the questions up on the screen that I got.
Okay.
So I asked on IG some time ago. I said, anyone have any questions? And a lot of them just inbox me. So there's no rhyme or reason. It's not in particular order. It's just this is what I was asked to ask you.
Okay.
Greg, EJR Performance, Evan. He also said, shout out to you for making cool shit.
Oh, nice.
Yes, very cool stuff.
Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you.
All right. I know it's the top questions. We only have 13.
All right.
So it's not that bad. So I guess hold on, let me get my life together. All right. So you kind of alluded to it earlier, but Greg, why are you controlling your turbo bike with your phone?
I just thought it would be interesting. I posted a video last winter of Andre's bike doing the remote start thing on it, and I got probably like 10 times the traffic of what I normally do on anything else that I post. So I thought, it might be interesting to do that. And I live in Michigan. Our winters are about 17 months out of the year. So there's not a lot of time to ride. There's a lot of time to be in the basement and think about doing stuff. So that kind of contributed to it. And I don't think I've seen anyone else do what I did. So while I didn't set the internet on fire, or I don't have people coming to my house asking me what it's all about, I thought it was interesting coming from a dorky engineer.
Well, guess what? They asked me. Actually, they're like, "Hey, did he start?" And I'm like, "Why would you ask me? I'm not the guy holding the phone. Look at his skin tone on his hand. Like, I'm not his skin tone,
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have any questions in chat right now, so I guess the next one I already asked you, but I'll ask you again. Do you race or tune?
I tune for myself, TOON. So I do well enough to not melt it. I tune my sand rail like out at the dunes, which is interesting, bouncing all over the place. I have drag raced my Gen 1, but this is back in, God, probably like 03, 04, forever ago. I'm pretty terrible at, I'm not good at launching a bike from a dead dig. Way back with my Han kit, I think I went like 914 at 160, just spinning like the first 8th mile. I went a few times, so I'm not a very accomplished racer. Never really done land speed racing. I mainly just, like I said, I kind of just ride on the street and tinker around.
Okay, well, I guess that goes hand in hand with number 3. And you know this was a roll racer. Roll racers,
worst roll racer.
Roll racers, man, they ask the craziest stuff, and I'm like, I've never met them in person. I've only spoken to them, So every ounce counts. How tall are you, and how much do you weigh?
So, as a funny inside joke, I'm an inch shorter than my 18-year-old son. I held out being taller than my son for the longest time. I'm about 6'2". My son's 6'3". And at the moment, unfortunately, about 235. So not a very good drag racing weight or roll racer when you're spending thousands.
You're a heavyweight, Greg. We call you a heavyweight.
You're a heavyweight. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. How about this, Greg? You want to race for one of your harnesses?
What do we race for? We were race baggers or something.
Yeah.
It's weird because like from a sports perspective or whatever, like I'm not a competitive person. Like I totally understand guys who are, and I think it's a good thing. But like when it comes to that, like I would never be the guy, at a bike meet or something like, yeah, I'm going to wipe the floor with all you guys, whether I thought it was true or not. Right. Part of it's probably being older too. Again, I'm the old guy of the group. So.
All right. And then this, you probably know who this is because
I do.
He said he bothers you quite a bit. Yeah, you can see it. So yeah.
So Jordan, if you are listening to this, go to your mailbox and get the package that I sent to your son. I sent him a message earlier asking if he got the package that I sent his newborn son, and he says I haven't been to the mailbox in 2 weeks. So yeah, like I told him on the Gen 3 stuff, to eliminate the stock dash, unfortunately, is going to eliminate a lot of the capabilities that the bike has, like all the mode stuff, the cruise control. So if you want to go down to like bare basics, then like, yeah, we can throw a tablet on there or throw like one of my digital dashes. But unfortunately, you'll lose some of the capability that the bike has now.
All right, Jordan.
If it's a half an ounce lighter, Jordan will want it.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, I did put up a post for the Roll Racers not that long ago. The Boost by Smith T-shirt, I think, weighed in at, I forget what it was, maybe 2 ounces.
T-shirt.
Listen, I'll take one of those, Greg.
All right.
All right. So Jordan, if you're listening, which he's pretty good about that. He tunes in Yeah, because you can see them up above. But anyways, okay. All right. So why have you focused on options for just basically max ECU versus other standalones, as you can read there?
So like I said, I've done a few. I did a fuel tech pretty early on, and there were some things about it that I really liked, and there were some things about it that I really didn't like. Never messed with the Holly. I've messed with the Link. Yeah, I don't know how I got bit so hard by the max ECU stuff, but what I know now, like certainly doing like the Gen 3 or like doing these Harleys, other than a Motec with like a whatever they call it, the developer license, which costs a lot of money. I don't think there's another ECU on the market right now that I'm aware of that I could do like the factory integration type of stuff that I'm trying to do right now, so that all your stock hand controls work, that the bike for the most part works like a stock bike, except for, you know, the stock ECU is completely out of it.
Okay. I mean, you kind of answered that. I was just, you know, Holly, and you could tell that's my question. I just.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've hired a few fuel techs, and I know guys like them because the dash is built in, and I have to give it to them. I mean, that's certainly a really cool feature. If you're, and again, like there's a lot of guys that use standalones, and they really just want like the basic, you know, all the standalones at, you know, 12,000 RPM wide open throttle kind of do the same thing. But if you get into where you need to do weird and interesting, complex stuff, like the Max ECU software is just, it's super flexible, and there's a lot that you can do with it. I don't mean to turn this into a Max ECU infomercial, but sorry.
Well, I mean, you know, you can kind of see that whether it be on your website or the channel, you know,
right.
you're kind of biased.
I'm kind of biased. Yeah,
you're kind of biased.
I'll hit up Steve for my endorsement money now.
All right. So you see the next question, right? So, but you already answered it.
Yeah, I mean, eventually, I'm sure. So here's the thing, like, you know, I've got a normal day job. Oddly enough, I do very similar things at my day job. I do data acquisition, kind of on a bigger scale, like, you know, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of channels for data collection and stuff like that. But I get bored, especially in the winter times in Michigan, and I like challenging stuff. So to me, like these new bikes that are kind of a pain in the ass, I get some enjoyment out of, you know, staring at zeros and ones on a screen for months at a time, and then eventually like, aha, I got the odometer to work, and everyone's like, oh, who cares? But I find that interesting. So certainly, I mean, I'm old, but I'm not ready to, you know, to die and give up motorcycles anytime soon. So I figure the Harley's out. I'm sure there'll be something else that I'm interested in. But my biggest fear is, like, oddly enough, like the new 2017 and newer Gixxer 1000s, I was super excited about that. Like I got that knocked out really fast compared to some of the other stuff that I've done. And I'm about ready to ship my second one. So like there's been almost zero interest in the 1000 so far. And I'm hoping it's just taking off slow, but like compared to the Boostas or like the guys that are inquiring about Harley stuff, like the Gixxer 1000 so far has been, you know, really, really light on traffic. So
is that
I hate to develop something because it's literally hundreds of hours to figure all the stuff out and to get it working, and at least to the level that I want to do. Like if you've ever seen any of the Gen 3 boosted videos, like with Motex on them, like the tack works on the dash, and like that's about it. Like nothing else really functions the way that the bike does stock. And you know, my goal is to try to make all that stuff work just the way that it used to.
Oh, okay. I forgot what I was going to ask you, but it was in reference to what you were talking about. It may come back.
We hang up, it'll come to you.
And then I think you already answered number 7. So the average cost of a total setup.
I have a Max Street package, which is pretty limited in inputs and outputs, but like a Gen 1 all motor basic nitrous or really basic turbo bike could go with that, and that starts at $2,000. On the cheap end though, I would say I've had a few guys order like stuff with like almost no options on it, but it seems like usually somewhere in the $3,000 to $4,000 is kind of where people land. On the really high end, probably about 6, like with a max race, my digital dash, 3 or 4 pressure sensors, boost control, wheelie sensor. I mean, my whole basement floor is consumed with, wiring stuff for a $6,000 setup, but those are kind of few and far between. It's usually the guys going just really, kind of going for everything, want all kinds of data.
Right.
Usually other engineering dorks like me.
I think.
Oh, that's
I think
what I was
we
going to
answered
ask
number
you.
8 as well, Reap. The
Yeah.
standalone versus the ECU. I think we talked about that earlier.
Yeah, we spoke on that. I think I was going to ask you about the Gixxer 1000 stuff. So,
Okay.
well, first of all, I kind of dislike Gixxers at the moment, but
I heard you got beat by one or something. Is that what the?
You know what? We're not going to talk about that.
Don't go there.
We're not going to talk about that. So, the harnesses and stuff that you built, were they drag bikes or roll race bikes or what?
Most of the stuff that I've done has been for, I would say, like mixed use, street, drag, some land speed. Definitely there's guys that are roll racing and stuff. Usually like a grudge bike guy wouldn't come to me because, they're looking to rip almost everything off of the bike, and they want a toggle switch for, to turn the bike on and hit the starter button, no lights, no nothing else. So usually the all out drag guys, and then probably even really the all out like roll race guys, if they're not turbo or something, if they're really just trying to chop lots of weight, those guys probably aren't my normal customer base. It's probably more like guys like me, like somebody who just wants, like, I just want an extra 250 horsepower on my street bike for the, for whatever reason. And I want good control of it. Might occasionally drag race, but, not getting a lot of like, pro street or anything, anything like that. That's kind of a whole different market where those guys are doing.
Okay. I think me and Cartel, we were talking about this some time ago. And this is not on this list, but is there a weight difference between a harness that perhaps you've built and then a stock harness? Like, how much weight is that?
Well, so the part that sometimes people are confused by is almost everything I do, the stock harness actually stays on the bike. So you actually are adding weight by adding. So like, see if I can hold this out far enough, but on a Gixxer 1000, you've got a max ECU. You've basically got this box right here. And then we've got, the igniter or whatever. All of that is going to be in addition to what was already on the bike to start with. So technically it's not a weight savings. You're actually adding some weight.
Oh, okay. I didn't, Cartel, I thought he was replacing the entire thing.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
All right. So you're not a replacement for the harness, for the engine harness.
No. So what I do is the stock harness stays there. So all of your, your side stand, your starter interrupt, your the dash, like all that stuff stays on the bike and remains functional. To do like a fully integrated, like a Gen 3 Hayabusa, like from scratch, that'd be like a $5,000 harness probably, like without ECU and whatever, just because there's a lot going on in that bike. And then to try to replicate all of that and then turn it back into, you could make it lighter for sure, but man, in my opinion, it wouldn't be worth it. But at the same time, I know guys spend thousands of dollars on nuts and bolts for their bikes too, which I'm in a different, again, I'm just an old guy street riding, so it wouldn't be worth it to me. But each guy wants something a little bit different for whatever they're doing.
Hey, I tell you, there is some truth to $1,000 or so on titanium.
Oh yeah,
those bolts are. Oh my God, they are ridiculous.
I believe it. Yeah, and then I mean, like I said, I'm 230 something pounds, so it's like, all right, just go on a diet, fatty.
And we already answered number 9. So it was, what was your favorite? Which you're biased is probably Max.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm not going to put it back on screen. What do you think of the closed loop option on the standalones? And then do you think they actually work? So like, they do?
Oh, they definitely work. Like I said, that guy basically fired up his bike. It was a Gen 3, fired it up on the max, went to the track. Air fuel was perfect, the quarter mile pass, and his fueling was really off by like 20 or 25%. So you can see basically what your real air fuel is, what the target was, and then you can see what, basically how much it had to correct in order to do it. Now, it works. So I think sometimes people get the idea that like, oh, I'll just put in an air fuel target and then not do any tuning in the fuel table, and I'll just go out and ride the bike and everything will be great. Like, yes, it works, but you want the tune to be as close as possible to start with, and then sort of let it massage things from there. You don't want to start up where the bike will barely run if the closed loop fuel control is turned off, and then try to rely on it to be fast enough to respond to everything and make the bike good. A quarter-mile pass is a lot different than riding on the street too. We all know, riding on the street, you get into all kinds of park throttle stuff, taking off from red lights, stoplights that can be annoying as heck if the tune is way off. Or on a drag bike, as long as the thing will do its burnout and then, pull through the gears up to red line, the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter.
Right.
But no, it definitely works. Now there's, in like anything else, there's parameters that you set. You basically tell it how much you will allow the closed loop fuel control to remove or add depending upon how far it's off. So you can tell it, allow it to add 40% fuel if needed. Well, if you get to the point to where you need 60% fuel for whatever reason, it's going to add 40, and then you're gonna lean out. So it's as good as you program the tool to be.
Okay. Now, see, I was under the impression that if I had closed loop, I could just go anywhere in the US and it'll fix itself. So am I correct, or I would have to street tune and where I get to my location?
No, you don't need to street tune where you're at. So the one thing I would say is, most of your stock bikes are going to have a barometric pressure sensor, so that if you start off at sea level and then you ride in the mountains up to 10,000 feet elevation, it's going to know that, and it's going to do fuel changes and things along the way. With most standalones, max ECU included, there is a map sensor port that's built into the ECU that when you first turn the key on, it measures barometric pressure. So it knows if you're at sea level or if you're at 10,000 feet, only when you turn the key on. Once the engine starts running, now it sees vacuum, it sees boost if you've got a turbo bike. It does not know that elevation or barometric pressure has changed until the next time you turn the key on or off, unless you wire in a separate sensor in addition to the one that's already built into it. So like I've done a few for guys who like live in Colorado, live in the mountains, and they do a lot of elevation change riding where they are moving like several thousand feet up or down, depending on whatever they're doing in a single ride. And for them, basically, we've just left the stock barometric pressure sensor on the bike and then set it up as one of the sensors to use. Wow. So generally speaking, you can be in, once everything is tuned, whether it's 30 degrees out or 130 degrees out, you're below sea level, you're at 10,000 feet. Once those things are set up and tuned in, then you're pretty much good. Not to say that guys who are drag racing and are trying to get every last tenth of a mile an hour or thousandth of a second or something out wouldn't be making changes, but for like street bike riding and all that kind of stuff, it's hard to get as good as a stock ECU is for just normal, always starts up perfectly, in drivability, like on a generally stock bike. But it certainly can be done.
Oh, okay. Well, Cartel, there's the answer to our question. We was definitely going back and forth because we always talk about whether a standalone is like is worth it. For those road racers or drag racers who always are traveling all over the U.S. racing, like
sure,
but okay, I mean, pretty much you said it's worth it. So
I've got a local customer, Jeff, that I did a Gen 2 setup on his bike a couple of years ago. I think he's put 15 or 20,000 miles on it, with the max ECU on there. Now he's a like a powertrain calibration engineer, so like he really knows his stuff when it comes to tuning and tuning strategies and stuff like that. His bike has been turbocharged for about a year now, and he's had really good luck with it. I mean, basically it is a street bike. He does take it to the drag strip. I think he actually rides it to the drag strip, but he's put a lot of miles on it with really good luck. I've put like my Gen 3 last year, think I put 2,000 or 2,500 miles on it, just street riding, but all of that was with the max ECU on there. I had the stock ECU on it for 100 or 200 miles or something, just to get a feel for how it worked and, you know, how it was supposed to work on the bike to make sure that whatever I was doing, it would be replicated with the standalone on there.
Okay. And do you have what is it called? Rolling anti-lag on your bike now, or?
Oh yeah.
Of course you do. Of course you do, because you start bikes with phones. So yeah.
It's the best thing ever. Actually, even without Boost, it's still fun to play with, but it's a whole different level of fun with Boost. I've not actually ridden the bike with that on there yet, now that I've had the turbo on. But like I said, every time I drive my sand rail, like that's all I do is play with rolling anti-lag.
Okay. I think one of the other questions that, I mean, well, I'll just ask it because someone asked me, and is it better to dyno tune, street tune, or do a combination of both to dial your bike in for racing?
I think, and there's like, I think if you ask 5 people, there'll be 7 opinions, but I kind of like the dyno tune first. Not that you can't street tune, but at least on the dyno, you can watch a lot of things at one time without actually having to watch the road coming at you at 150 or 200 miles an hour. I tuned my sand rail out on the sand dunes, like I'm literally bouncing all over the place. Like it was really difficult to do. And, you know, the whole time I'm watching for traffic, I'm watching for side-by-sides to cut out in front of me. I'm trying to do everything nice and smooth. I personally think that you want to get the tune relatively close and then verify stuff or do minor tweaks like out on the street. Now, at the same time, I know guys that are like, I never go to the dyno. I only tune at the track. I only tune on the street, whatever. I think it's just kind of whatever works for you. Certainly my comfort level in trying to watch air fuel, trying to watch boost, in addition to the road and everything else, like it's a little bit, too much for this old brain to try to keep track of.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's always like a topic of discussion. So
yeah.
Yep.
It's good to hear different opinions,
Yeah. I'm not. Yeah. All right. Can you make a plug and play for anything if asked? Somebody, I'm serious. Like I'm telling you, like these were the top like 10 to 15.
Could or would I? So I have a weird story along those lines. I have a 92 Camaro Z28, like the last body style of the 3rd gen, like old IROC body style or whatever. I love the car, but last year the stock ECU took a crap in it and the car wouldn't run. And I bought a replacement and it lasted like 2 minutes and then that ECU quit working. And I'm like, crap, what do I do with this thing? Do I put a carburetor on it? So I took the old ECU, instead of giving it back to Rock Auto for like the $30 core charge, I desoldered all the ECU header connectors out of it and I wired a max on it. And so I haven't street driven it a ton, but at least in that, like I used my same ECU that I use on my buggy, on my bike, and on my test bench, and I put it on my Camaro and was driving it for a little while. So
working.
Can I or will I is the challenge, because it's always like someone's like, hey, I got a 1972 2-stroke, whatever. Can you wire a harness for it? And I'm like, well, I don't even know what that thing looks like, let alone any of the connectors or how it works. So
hey, Greg, so you said something and it just made me laugh, because we were talking about this prior to you getting on. What type of, what did you say? Solderer? Is that how you say that?
Solder,
you use? Remember that, Cartel?
Yeah.
It's probably going to be something crazy, but what do you use?
I think it's just 60-40, just kind of nothing super special, other than it is super expensive now. I mean, a little 1-pound spool is up to like $50 or something.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we were laughing about that prior to.
I have, as far as my supplies go, like I do everything out of my basement, and I have, like, it used to be a small bedroom, and over the last 2 or 3 years, like, it's gotten ridiculous. I have probably 5 times as much stuff that will fit in that room that's actually in there now. But I mean, I probably have 5,000 or 6,000 connectors, like, in my basement for pretty much anything on a Busa, Gixxer 1000, all the stuff that I do. I've just got boxes and bins full of that stuff, kind of overrun with it all. If I wasn't making money on it, I think my wife would be upset about it. But
I swear I was about to ask you that. Like, she allows that?
Yeah, no, she seems okay with it. We go out to dinner or something. I always tell my kids, like, the next motorcycle you hear fly by or something, thank them because they probably just bought our dinner for us.
Hey, that's what's up.
Can't be mad at that, man. Can't be mad at that.
And then I guess last but not least, someone says, so I want to say this will go to EJR's podcast. He was in here earlier, but
okay.
Him and Adam was talking about your YouTube channel. Remember we talked about that? It wasn't this one, it was actually their podcast.
Yep.
And so can you break things down from now on, Barney style, on your YouTube channel when you're explaining your products and what you got going on?
I'll go real slow. Yes.
Yeah, really slow. Add some music too.
Yes.
And some enthusiasm.
Yeah. Well, voiceover. And the silly thing is, like, I don't know about you guys, but I cannot stand the sound of my voice. And unfortunately, all the crap that I do, I'm always listening to it because I'm always making these stupid videos and whatever. And at my day job, I do some similar things. Like, I put together a lot of tutorial videos for like some of our portable data acquisition for some software products that we have. So like my voice is all over the place and I've got the dorkiest sounding voice. Like, we need to find, like a really cool, like, I don't know, some of the much more appealing sounding voice to do all my stuff for me.
Do a voiceover, Greg. Put Samuel L. Jackson as your voiceover.
Yes, that would be perfect.
Samuel L., right? Wire mother, you know what I mean? Like, what?
So this is what you do.
What?
If he told you to buy a standalone, you would have to do it.
Oh,
I'm not.
Yeah, you would have to. Boost by Smith.
Well, what about this? What about you can incorporate Mrs. Smith as a voiceover?
There you go. That's not a bad idea.
You know what I mean?
She's much prettier than me too, so she could be a good model.
Hey, Mustang Dame said auto-tune your voice.
I
mean, you probably could build a studio in your basement with everything you have going on. Yeah. But I mean, you know what though? You actually and that's the end of the questions per se. Like I said, that was like the top 10 to 15 questions. Like I said, me and Cartel, we're always discussing this stuff, and I'm really appreciative of you coming on because
thank you very much, Greg.
it
Great
was
insight,
awesome.
Man.
I appreciate the invite. I was uptight about it because I'm not generally a super like outgoing social person or whatever, but this was pretty fun.
No, we appreciate you a lot,
don't
Greg.
worry about it. We're low threat. And then we're low threat. I'm going to present your website real quick.
Oh, nice.
Just so everyone can, I was going to do the social media thing, but everyone, if you're watching, and there's always a lot of people that's going to come back and watch later. So
sure.
This is his website. So,
and so the Max ECU stuff is what I really enjoy doing. I do a lot of other stuff. I do shift lights. I do air compressor, air shifter, like compressor harnesses. I do like plug and play kill tethers, plug and play ignition deletes, ABS delete. I do a little bit of everything, but mainly Hayabusa, GSXR 1000, a little bit of ZX14.
So you do ZX14 stuff as well.
Not ECU wise, but yeah, like I make a like the RSR kill box. I do a setup for that. I do a plug and play WeGo O2 air fuel and data logger. There's a few different things that I do.
Right.
They're just terrible to work on. Those bikes are so impossible to get wiring in anywhere.
What's that? A ZX14?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like changing spark plugs.
They're terrible bikes to work on too.
They're terrible to work on. Yeah, but
terrible.
With that said, I mean the Gen 3 boost under the tank is kind of terrible too, with the with the throttle butterfly thing, with the e-throttle and ABS. Yeah. I mean, there's not a whole lot of room in it either. But
okay, well, and I can share your YouTube channel as well. I have everything Boost by Smith pulled up.
So, cool. I used to have for a little while I was doing it was kind of similar. It was kind of similar to the ECU flashing stuff, but I was big into brewing beer. and I was doing these like beer fermentation controllers. And I had a website called BOOSTBYSMITH. I did that for a couple of years, but then it kind of fizzled out.
Yeah, Greg, listen, thank you very much for coming on, man. You do amazing work, bro.
Hey, thank you.
Keep it up, man. You know,
nice to meet you guys in person finally. Yeah, or kind of.
Well, kind of. Now I'm gonna go outside and stand on the corner. I gotta earn some money. My Gen 3 can be fast.
Hey, man.
But I gotta finish my other products first, though. I gotta finish my other stuff first. My projects are sucking right now, so.
Sounds like
Thank you very much, Greg, once again, man. You know, hopefully we speak soon again, and you know, we wish you well over here from our podcast.
You guys as well. Hope you have a great weekend, or what's left of it.
All right, and tell Mrs. Smith, thank you for letting you on, because you should be doing something for her right now.
Yeah, will do.
Take it easy, Greg.
All right, see you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.